I got to spend 1 hour with Pokemon Champions and speak to the game director afterward, and I think this might be the next big evolution in Pokemon battling. Alright, so let's start at the top. Pokemon Champions is a turn-based Pokemon battle simulator that is free to play and coming to Nintendo Switch, Nintendo Switch 2, and eventually mobile. The Switch versions are supposed to come in April, and the mobile version is supposed to come later this year. This is a big deal. Competitive Pokemon has been around for a very long time, however, there's never been a consistent platform to battle in Pokemon. Every few years they release a new generation, and with that the meta changes, there are new Pokemon added, there's a different gimmick. There's never been anything consistent. Now there have been some fan-created battle simulators like Showdown, and this feels somewhat akin to this, although I don't think it'll replace Showdown, something I'll get to later. Just like in the games, you can choose a party of 6 Pokemon. You can do either single or double battles in ranked, casual, or private matches. And at launch, you'll be able to use the Mega Evolution gimmick for this. This makes a lot of sense considering Pokemon Legends ZA used Mega Evolutions. Eventually, it seems like there will be other gimmicks introduced to champions. We've already seen footage of terastallization, but it kind of makes sense that we are getting Megas first. They introduced a ton of new Megas in Pokemon Legends ZA, and people don't really know how they play in a turn-based setting. After speaking to the game director, Masaki Hoshino, it seems like they want Pokemon Champions to stick around. In particular, they want turn-based Pokemon battles to be available at all times, no matter what kind of gimmicks or combat style future Pokemon games take. Now, I found this really interesting because for a very long time, Pokemon battles have always been turn-based. Now, a big reason for that, at least based on my speculation, is because they always wanted to cater to the casual players as well as the competitive players. Now, the competitive scene has grown quite a bit in the last few years, and dismantling that would be very bad for a sizable chunk of the audience. By making something like Champions, Game Freak is free to experiment with the combat system in Pokemon games while keeping a consistent turn-based battle system alive at all times. Now, obviously, whether or not Pokemon Champions will last for, another 30 years, we don't really know. It's going to depend on how that game launches, how the community reacts, how people feel about it, but based on what I've played, Pokemon Champions is exactly what I want from a Pokemon battle simulator. It keeps most of the depth while also making it fairly approachable. The approachability, I think, is probably the most important thing about Pokemon Champions. As someone who has invested a lot of time in competitive Pokemon, the barrier to entry is thick, and getting through that is very difficult. Now, a lot of this is in part due to all of the grinding you need to do in order to build a competitive ready team. You can spend hours and hours and hours and hours just getting one Pokemon the way you want it. Pokemon Champions just kind of gets rid of all of that. So once you've recruited a Pokemon, either from Roster Ranch or transferred one into home, you can go into the train menu, and from there you can change its stats, change its nature, change its ability, swap out moves, and train it. This will cost you BP, but from what I could tell, it seems fairly reasonable. Once you've locked in that Pokemon stats and abilities and moveset, it's done. That's it. You can immediately throw that on a team and start battling with it. This is huge. During the demo, we got to essentially build an entire team of Pokemon. 4 of those Pokemon we recruited from Roster Ranch, and the other 2 were Pokemon that were already available. Within about 10-15 minutes, I built out an entire Tailwind team. Not the best Tailwind team, but a serviceable one, and I started battling right away. Normally, that could take a very, 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 very long time. So my first impressions for Pokemon Champions, very good. I think getting rid of all that grinding will introduce competitive Pokemon to an entirely new audience. And this is good for the health of the game and for many other reasons. Another thing that Pokemon Champions has that I think could be helpful, although I didn't get to see the full extent of it, is tutorials. There are a lot of things that you don't really need to engage with if you're just playing through the basic story in Pokemon, such as natures, abilities, certain moves. The list goes on and on and on. A lot of times people probably don't even know the difference between special attacks and physical attacks because you can just kind of brute force your way through the story. This teaches you most of that, at least based on what I played. It'll teach you the difference between special and physical attacks, as well as some of the other nuance. Now, I only got to see a few of the tutorial lessons, so I'm curious to see how in-depth it goes. I'd hope it explains just about all of those mechanics, because I think for new players, given that training is so much easier now, the biggest thing that players will need to learn is how all these different interactions work. And a good tutorial could be super helpful. Now, there are some changes to how Pokemon work in Pokemon Champions. A big one, something that the community has been wondering for a long time, will there be IVs? I asked the director straight up, and he said no, there are no IVs. Apparently, him and Morimoto, one of the original creators of Pokemon, had heated debates on whether or not IVs should stay in the game. I just said the word IVs a bunch, and I realize I haven't explained what that is. But for those who don't know, those are individual value stats that a Pokemon is born with. They are randomized, and competitive players typically grind Pokemon in order to get the IV spread the exact way they want. That's not in Champions at all. The only stats you are manipulating are through the nature and the EV stats. Generally, I think this is probably going to be a good thing. According to the director, they did this because of approachability. There are so many parameters already there, and they kind of felt that IVs just kind of added an extra layer that might throw off new players. I think this was probably the right call. Now, this definitely has some implications for the meta going forward, but I think a lot of that stuff is pretty minor. Maybe not pretty minor. I think some of that stuff is kind of big, but I think the meta will be able to adapt around that and come up with new or slightly altered strategies that will still work while keeping things approachable for new players. Potentially more controversial, though, is that there are only Final Evolution Pokemon available in Champions at launch. This one really surprised me. Someone from Hypebeast at the Roundtable interview noticed that and asked the director, and he pretty much said, yeah, only fully evolved Pokemon will be available at launch. Now, this may seem minor, and to some extent it kind of is, but there is an item called Eviolite that makes a lot of unevolved Pokemon viable by making them more powerful. Believe it or not, Pokemon like Murkrow are actually incredibly good with an Eviolite. They are a very good support Pokemon that can set up Tailwind and do some other funky status stuff. But now that's not in the game. Once again, I'm not really sure how this is going to affect the meta. I think some strategies will be off the table. I think what will likely happen is that players will find other Pokemon that will fill the role of those Eviolite Pokemon. Now, the director did say that they could reintroduce not fully evolved Pokemon later, but at launch, this is how it's gonna be. Okay, so let's get back to the team I built. So with Roster Ranch, I recruited Hydrapple, the Grass Dragon Pokemon. I recruited Starmie because I wanted to test out Starmie's Mega Evolution, which unfortunately wasn't in the build. I also recruited Talonflame and Tinkaton. We were only able to recruit 4 Pokemon from Roster Ranch, but we had some other ones we could use as well. So I also threw in Basculegion and Whimsicott, which were already there. Now, as I said, I created a Tailwind team. I basically used Whimsicott and Talonflame in order to offer support for my heavy hitters, which was mostly Hydrapple. Hydrapple just kind of tanked or cleared any issue that I ran into. Now, the battles themselves largely played out the same. There are some quality of life stuff there that helps, which I think fans have already kind of caught on to, such as a health bar percentage for your opponents, and now moves denote whether or not they are 4 times super effective or 2 times super effective. That's minor stuff, but I think that's all good information to give players, so you don't need a type chart next to you. All in all, having played a bit of Pokemon Champions, as of now, I think that this is something that the community has sorely needed for a long time. It's an easy way to learn competitive Pokemon. It's an easy way to train Pokemon. It's also just Pokemon battles on repeat, which I know battling isn't the highlight for everyone when it comes to Pokemon games, but for a lot of people, myself included, it's always been the highlight, and the games themselves usually lack that difficulty that I enjoy. However, there is still one question that remains. How will monetization work? Or at least that's what I would have said if the Pokemon Company didn't release a trailer yesterday that shows what's in the game starter pack. Now, we don't know how much this will cost, but we do know what it includes, which is extra box space, some extra tracks to listen to while battling, tickets that can be used to recruit Pokemon, and tickets that can be used to train. Now, this is just speculation, but I have to imagine you'd be able to purchase or maybe unlock these tickets in other ways as well if you don't have the VP necessary in order to recruit a Pokemon outright. Anyway, that's just speculation. We won't know until the game launches on April 8th. Anyway, back to the video. Pokemon Champions is a free-to-play game, and there is a battle pass. I could see it in the main menu. Unfortunately, when I clicked on it, nothing happened. There was also a shop, which once again, when I tried to click on, nothing happened, but it seems like that's where you can use your VP to buy held items. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's also another currency that you could purchase that would let you get cosmetics for your avatar. They've already said that VP itself cannot be purchased, but I could easily see something else being available, so you could buy different customization options for your character. Aside from that, I don't know the pricing of anything. All that said, it's really hard to make a judgment on how all this will work without speculating too much, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but I think the one thing that I hope for, and that I think probably everyone is hoping for, is that this won't fall into any pay-to-win schemes. The last thing I'd want to see is people being able to climb the ranks super easily because they are able to purchase the best Pokemon, purchase the best items, while a player who isn't willing to spend that money will be stuck at the bottom ring. I think Pokemon Home should be sort of an equalizer for that, and that you can bring Pokemon from home directly there. But if you think about it, even Pokemon Home's not free, so they are going to get you one way or another. So will Pokemon Champions be the end-all be-all for turn-based Pokemon battles? Honestly, I don't know. I hope it is, but to be honest, I think I need to spend more hands-on time with the game in order to answer that question. But more importantly, I think the community needs to get a hold of this game. And I think we need to see how the community responds, how competitive players feel about it, how casual players feel about it, because I do think there is a potential for this to blow the doors wide open on competitive Pokemon, and there could be so many more players getting interested in it, which, like I said up front, is great for the game. If you want more of my thoughts on Pokemon Champions, head over to GameSpot.com and check out my article. There is a lot of interesting details there that I missed out on here. And for more Pokemon Champions coverage, stay tuned to GameSpot.